Hello and welcome to our weekly share. For the last 2 years, we have been learning the Alshich. I am in your hands as to whether we should do another series of the Alshich, going on to other parts of the Alshich which we haven't covered in the previous 2 years, or if we will maybe explore other commentaries to deliver our weekly share in the Parsha. And I do apologize that I am late in posting Lech Lecha, and that's simply because I was doing a Shabbaton at a wonderful shul in Lawrence, in New Jersey, which is not too far, in New York, which is not too far from where I live. It's called Beis Shalom, and it was a fabulously enjoyable and successful Shabbos. But I was a bit busy preparing before, so that's why I'm late. So if you would like it to continue as the Alshich share, please be in contact with me and let me know. You can post it at the bottom of my page if you're looking at this in the YouTube channel, my YouTube channel, or you can send me an email to yy@askrabbiyyy.com, yy@askrabbiyyy.com, which is the same email address if you'd like to sponsor the share, for which I would be extremely grateful, and have it exclusive for somebody who is maybe in need of a bracha, or somebody who wants to celebrate a simcha, commemorate somebody who's passed away. All of those options more than welcome. Talking of which, this share is dedicated for the refuah shalema of that little boy we've been davening for, Reb Yerucham ben Chani Yehudis, and also for a friend of mine who has been struggling over many years with an illness, doing a little bit better, but ups and downs. So I'm sure our learning together plays a part in his ups. So Rafael Chai ben Sarah. And for my dear wife, Ita Rivka Bas Sima Esther, who is struggling after a complete knee replacement. And Yecheskel Yehuda ben Yenta, who is a cousin of mine and who's recovering from very, very serious surgery in Eretz Yisrael, but apparently doing well, and we wish them all lots of love and refuah shalema. And I think that's all we have to say for now. Good. So you're going to let me know if we're going to allow me to, as it were, stretch out and reach out beyond the confines of the Alshich, although I'm never very far away from the Alshich. I'd like me to continue with an Alshich focused share for the coming year. Good. The Parsha of Lech Lecha. The Parsha of Lech Lecha is tremendously interesting. In the Parsha of Lech Lecha, which, of course, is the beginning of the journey. I mean, that's what it says, Lech Lecha, go on a journey. This is the story, this is the part of the Torah where the Jewish story really begins. Noach is not Jewish. Adam Rishon is not Jewish. And there are no Jews until Avrohom Avinu, who is the first Jew. So this is really the launch of the Jewish story. And therefore, and also the launch, as everybody knows, of Avram's 10 tests. In Pirkei Avos, it says he quickly grabbing the Gemara, it says famously that there are 10 tests that Avram Avinu was given. And the question is, what are these? Sorry, this is in Perek Chamishi of Pirkei Avot, and it's Mishnah Gimel, Asar and Sion, Hasa Avram Avinu, Ba'amad B'chulam. Hashem tested Avram Avinu with 10 tests, and he passed every single one of them. To show you how much Hashem loved Avram Avinu, that he gave them 10 tests. There's a lot to say there, but that would be more philosophical. I want to focus on the Chumash and what it has to say. And before we get to the test of Avram Avinu in the Chumash, let's see what the commentators have to say in Pirkei Avos. Now, the three commentators, the classic commentators in Pirkei Avos, are the Rambam, Rashi, and Rabbeinu Yonah. So, what were the 10 tests of Avram Avinu? So, let me read to you what Rashi says. Rashi says that the first test was Techila Bikish Nimrod Lahargai. The first one was the fact that Nimrod, that is the arch enemy of Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu is Nimrod's nemesis, and of course we all know that he's some sort of insight through his mystical powers, which he clearly possessed, that there's going to be a boy child born who is going to challenge him for his position as being supreme leader of the earth. Very tyrannical. If you want to get a flavor of what Avram Avinu's life was like, or what the environment, society he lived in was like, think of political correctness run wild. Woke culture run wild. Think of woke culture, political correctness, elevated to the status of North Korea, because the pasuk says they're all b'shefa achas b'devarim achodim. They all had to speak the same way, and they all had to think the same way. And along comes somebody who challenges that Avraham Nohar. It comes from Avraham Nohar, the other side of the river. The world on one side, him on the other. And one Jew fearlessly leaps up and says, "You're wrong." Now, to say that is try and be different. To be different is to put yourself in profound danger. And of course, he is put in profound danger. And Nimrod attempts to kill him, and he's thrown into a jail for 12 years or so. And it's a dungeon, and he won't recant. He won't throw in the towel. That's the world that Avrohom Avinu lives in. And then there's the 10 tests. And that revolution that occurs through Avram passing these tests is going to change the direction of the entire world. So the first one says Rashi, is Hashem sends him along, or sends along Nimrod, or lets Nimrod try and kill him. That's number one. Number two, Shoiv Hashlicho Be'or. Sorry, someone missed that. I think that's number two. Yeah, sorry, two. Says Rashi, he threw him Shoiv Hashlicho Be'or Kastim. Number two is he throws him into the furnace. So after he's taken out of the dungeon, which he has been incarcerated in for over 10 years, then the 3 days where people bring wood for the execution of this heretic who has told people that Nimrod is not a god. Heresy indeed. And now he's going to be burned alive, so that's obviously challenge number two. And number three is interesting, the Golsa Me'aretz Moledotoi, Lech Lecha. And when he's exiled from the land of his birth, that's going to be extraordinarily difficult for Avrohom Avinu. After all, Avrohom Avinu's mission in life is to bring people close to Hashem. If you were to think logically, where would be the place that I would be most successful in giving shiurim in, hopefully, as I did yesterday in Shabbos, in that shul I told you about, Beth Shalom in Lawrence, New York, then if it was successful, and I hope it was, and I think it was, then you would think, yeah, well, but that's over there, back where he comes from, when they understand his accent properly, then it would be surely be more successful. And Avrohom Avinu thinks that. But Hashem says, no, go from your land, from the place of your birth, from your father's house, to the land which I'm going to show you. So that was a test for Avrohom Avinu. So again, according to Rashi, test number one, the fact the king tries to kill him. Test number two, when the king actually catches him, imprisons him, he then tries to burn him to death. And then, Lech Lecha, that's Rashi. Then, Rabbeinu Yonah. Rabbeinu Yonah has a different take on this. The first one, Ur-Kastim. So he doesn't count the attempt of Nimrod on his life as a child as being one of the tests. He says Ur-Kastim. And then after that, he goes on to the next one. Shani, if I can find the Shani here in the... where is Shani? Shani. She says, let's say it's my outside. Number two, he's told Lech Lecha. So for Rabbeinu Yonah, it's number two. For Rashi, Lech Lecha is number three. And then he goes on and says what the other ones are. But the Rambam, test number one, is Lech Lecha. So the first time Hashem speaks to him to give him a test, to give him a command, that is Lech Lecha, that's the test. Therefore, he doesn't agree with Rashi that being hunted as a child, to be killed, to stop his adulthood and his challenge to Nimrod, because of course Nimrod had a glimpse of the future and saw that he doesn't count that at all. Nor, astonishingly, does he count Ur-Kastim being thrown into the furnace, and the 3 days of preparation where he sees the pile of wood that's going to burn them to pieces being assembled. So the question really is, why does the Rambam dismiss Ur-Kastim, Avram being thrown into the furnace? Rashi doesn't. Rabbeinu Yonah doesn't. The Rambam does. And that's the question we're going to examine. Now, bear in mind, but keep that idea in mind, that the world is truly a totalitarian state where you're not allowed to think differently. You think of 1984, sadly, think of so many places in the world today, particularly I think of American campuses, university campuses, et cetera, where you're only allowed to think one thing. And if you're not, you're in serious trouble. You're only allowed to express one idea. You're only allowed to speak one sort of language, at least the people who speak it think so. So imagine that taken to the extreme. Keep that idea in mind, and let's examine this and go a little bit further. And Avrohom Avinu challenges this. We'll see how he challenges it in a second, but I want to turn to, now this, as normally we learn the Alsha, but this is Torah's Kelm, the Yeshiva of Kelm, founded by Reb Simcha Zissel. Reb Simcha Zissel, we're going back, Talmud Shoslanta, to the beginnings, I suppose, of the Musar movement, or maybe the cream of the Musar movement, the pinnacle of the Musar movement. And this the classic, let's call it the classic stage of the Musar movement. And Reb Simcha Zissel was one of the great Musar giants, Bahid Yeshiva in Kelm. Kelm becomes known in the world. So many of the world's great Rosh Yeshiva were produced from Kelm. One can think of Reb Yerucham of Mir, who was the Mashgiach of the Yeshiva of the Chofetz Chaim, and then, of course, the Mashgiach of Mir itself. You can think of Rabbi Dessler, whose father learned in Kelm, and he, of course, was a Talmud of Kelm, and so very many more. So let's keep with Kelm. This is a shir of the Torah of Kelm. This is what Reb Yerucham has to say. It's a tremendous thing. In his famous sefer, it's called Das Chochmah Musar. And Das Chochmah Musar, Das, knowledge of Chochmah Musar, because the sefer Chochmah Musar was written by his great Rebbe, Reb Simcha Zissel. So Reb Simcha Zissel first, or Yisrael, Reb Yisrael Salantis for him, and then his Talmud, Reb Simcha Zissel, and then Reb Yerucham of Mir. Incidentally, one of the great Talmudim of Reb Yerucham of Mir, I'm honored to tell you, is my Rosh Yeshiva, Reb Leib Gurvitz, Tzadik Livrocha, and I'm ashamed to mention myself in amongst all those names, but at least I aspire to be a Talmud of Reb Leib Gurvitz, and of course his great brother and all the other Rosh Yeshiva of Gesed Reb Lapin. Anyway, basically, this is what Reb Yerucham has to say on the subject. He points out a very interesting concept, and we've discussed this in the past, but it's well worth coming back to it again. If you have your little art scroll Chumash, and you turn to, make it easy, page 50, or if you don't have the art scroll, it's Perek Yud Aleph, and it's Posuk Kovov. It's talking about Terach. Terach, of course, is Avrohom Avinu's father. And it says, Vahi Terach Shivim Shana, and Terach was 70 years of age, but Yolad as Avram, when, as Nochor, as Haran, so when his three sons were born. I'm not sure if they were triplets or they were born in the same year. Not exactly sure how that would work, but in those days, such things were different to how they are these days. But the important point to focus on is that Terach, Avram's father, was 70 when Avram was born. Then, as we come to the end of Parshas Noach, it says the following thing. It says, someone says that off they go, that the family goes off after Ur-casting. They then try to move to Eretz Yisrael. They start to go to Eretz Yisrael. They don't quite finish. And then the last pasuk says, V'yi me Terach dies. And it says, V'yi me Terach chomish shonim. Terach lived to be 5 years, Umasayim Shana, and 200 years, 205 years. V'yomas Terach Haran. And Terach died in Haran. So Haran is the last place they get to on the way to Israel. Don't quite get to Israel as a family, and Terach dies there. How old was he? 205. And then we turn to our Seder of Lech Lecha. And Lech Lecha starts off with Yom Hashem el Abraham, Lech Lecha Matzim Land. This is the first prophecy. Prophecy, of course, is God speaking with you, communicating to you. The first time God speaks to Avrohom Avinu is now, when he says, now is the time to go to Eretz Yisrael. How old is Avram when he goes to Eretz Yisrael? So the pasuk says that he was 75. Let's see if I can get that for you. Can't find it. And he was 75 years of age when he goes to Eretz Yisrael. Fine. So the problem, therefore, is like this. If you follow what I've said, Terach was 70 when Avram was born. Avram is 75 when he leaves Eretz Yisrael, or leaves his father to go to Eretz Yisrael. Therefore, and Terach lives to be 205. But hold on a minute. At the end of Parshas Noach, it says that Terach died. And then it says, Lech Lecha, Avram, go. And then it tells him he was 75. So it looks as though Avram only went after his father died. That was the previous parsha. Chronologically, Terach dies. Avram goes to the land of Israel. But the arithmetic doesn't add up. Because if Terach was 70 when he was born, and Avram leaves when he's 75, then obviously that meant Terach was 145 when his son left him to go to Eretz Yisrael. And if you take 145 from 205, where it says that Terach died when he was 205, then when Avram left, he hadn't died. He had another 60 years of life. And yet the Torah writes that Avram left or suggests that Avram left only after his father died. But he didn't. His father lived for another 60 years. So why does the Torah write the story in such a way as to assume that Avram only leaves his father after his father had died, when in actual fact there's another 60 years of life? As we saw, 70 years when Avram was born, 75 years when Avram left, 145, subtracted from 205 years of his life, he left his father for 60 years. That's the question that Rabbi Yerucham asks. And Rabbi Yerucham points to Rashi, and Rashi gives us two answers. And Rashi's answers are very interesting. One is a more philosophical answer. The philosophical answer is that we consider that an evil person, even though he's breathing, he's walking, is still, from a spiritual point of view, a dead person. He's dead, he's lost his potential, or he's killed his own potential. So he may be walking and talking, but he's dead. And as Terach was a very bad man, then indeed he was considered dead. So from a Jewish philosophical point of view, theological point of view, it's appropriate to say that Terach had died in the Quran because he was a bad person then, so he's not really leaving a live person. Number one. But then Rashi brings a very puzzling answer to that problem. And he says, in order that people should not turn around and say that Terach left his father, Avram left his father, and therefore, for 60 years, and therefore was absolutely uninterested in the midst of Kibbud Av V'Em, in order to hide the fact that Avram left his father at God's command alone for 60 years, opening him up to criticism about no concern about his poor old father, the Torah writes the fact that he left his father as in a way that suggests he only left his father after his father had died. That's what Rashi says. So that people shouldn't say bad things about Avrohom Avinu. Obviously, a very problematic Rashi. And says Reb Yerucham, it's particularly problematic because anybody with the most basic knowledge of arithmetic can do as we just did. Add the 70 years of Terach's age when Avram was born to the 75 years of Avram's life when he left. Subtract that 145 from the 205 years of Terach's life and see clearly that he left his father alone, his poor old father alone, for 60 years. So what on earth, asks Reb Yerucham, is Rashi talking about? That in order to hide the fact, to camouflage the fact that Avram left his father for 60 years, it writes it in such a way as to suggest he only left him after he died. Well, that's okay if you take the last posset where you said he died and then Avram, and then we assume Lech Lecha comes chronologically next. But that's to ignore the fact that the same psukim obviously show you quite clearly that at least he left his father alone for 60 years, as we just demonstrated. And Rabbi Yerucham offers a tremendously shocking, and it's only shocking because it's so obvious, truth, and that is the message he says that Rashi is really trying to convey. Rashi knows that, of course, anybody can add the 1775 and subtract 145 from 205 and see the truth, but he says people won't do that. And here's the scary bit, because Rabbi Yerucham says, because people don't look. People don't think. Because people don't look and people don't think. It's enough, it's sufficient for the Torah to write that last verse at the end of Parshas Noach to suggest that Avram left only after Terach had died. And don't worry about people digging deep and saying, is that right? Hold on a minute, let me look here. Because people don't bother looking. People don't look, people don't think. Now that's a very, very important message. Because this is the beginning, as I said, at the beginning of the Shir, two beginnings there. At the beginning of the Shir, this is the beginning of the story of the Jewish people. This is the start of Klal Yisrael. And Klal Yisrael starts with the first Jew, who is Avrohom. And he ends as a world where, of course, people don't think. Think of George Orwell's 1984, you actually edit words out of the lexicon of the dictionary, of people's vocabulary, so they're not allowed to think about those concepts. Of course they don't think. When it tells the story about the Tower of Babel, which Abram was involved in bringing Hashem's attention to stop it being the project being fulfilled, that this is a world where people think one thing and speak in one way. Of course they speak in one way. Because they don't think. And maybe the fact that they speak in one way means that it was a device to make sure they don't think. But Avram speaks differently. Avram thinks differently. Avram speaks differently. He speaks. He challenges it. He challenges the world in which he lives because he thinks. They don't think. People don't think. And incidentally, that's so true today as well. But if you're a Ben Avram or a Bas Avram or a Bas or Ben Avram Basora, which would be the proper way to say this, then you should be a thinker. So in the world in which people don't think, Avram, the first Jew, he's somebody who thinks. That's the first test of Avrohom Avinu. But we still haven't answered our question, which is, why is it that the Rambam doesn't talk about the Ur-Kasdim test when he's thrown into a furnace as being one of the 10 tests of Avrohom Avinu? So, having looked at Reb Yerucham, the Talmud of Reb Simcha Zissel, let's turn to Reb Simcha Zissel. This is his Sefer on the Chumash. It's known as Or Rashash. And we're going to go into this in some depth, and it's absolutely fabulous. Lots of reading to invite you into to hear what he has to say. And he says the following thing. You know, there's a famous pasuk in Daniel. Daniel is based in Kof Aleph, and it says, Yohev chochma l'chachimin. Chochmosa. He gives his wisdom to the wise. Hashem gives his wisdom to the wise. What does that mean? So let me read to you what he says here, because it's absolutely fabulous. So he says, nothing makes itself. Because everything before it is made, by definition, isn't there. It's not made. There's nobody there to make it. This is the great question. When Avrohom Avinu is hidden away by his mother, who's called Amasleah Bas Karnava, and incidentally, it's a segula. There's some sort of positive spiritual energy that's created by saying her name. When Amasleah Bas Karnava hides her son in the cave, as she does for a number of years, so he's not killed by Nimrod, who's hunting for him. When he eventually emerges into the world, he sees a world for the first time. We, of course, see the world gradually, from babies to toddlers to little children, and we take it for granted. He doesn't take it for granted. And according to Reb Simcha Zissel, when he comes out from the cave, he wonders, how does this world work? Everything is interfaces with everything else. It's a perfectly balanced machine in every aspect. How did this come about? So he says, so Avrohom Avinu comes out and he says like this. How did this work come about? There's only two possibilities. Either it made itself or somebody made it. If it made itself, we can obviously ask the question. Incidentally, he was 4 when he came out and saw the world for the first time, according to some opinions. I don't know what you were thinking about at the age of 4. I was not thinking in these matters, but Avrohom Avinu was. Avrohom Avinu was a genius. And he thought to himself like this. How did the world come about? Either it made itself or somebody made it. If it made itself, then I have to obviously ask the question, did it make itself before it existed or after it existed? If it made itself before it existed, how does nothing make something? And if it made itself after it existed, then it already existed. Driven to the conclusion that somebody made it. So let me read that again. Obviously somebody made it. And after Avrohom Avinu sees a world which is a perfectly balanced, as I said before, machine. And then his next question is, who was the person? Right, this creator of it. What his nature? Let's all working this out logically. What is his nature? Repeating the same argument. It couldn't have made itself, but if nothing was there before, nothing cannot make something. It's just made. Who made it? So you go on to say the person who made it is the person who brought the entire universe into existence. Kodman bli reishis, that he's above time. If he brought a world, a cause and effect universe, a world of a past, present, and future, our world into existence, that is, he's above that world. That's his creation. He's above time. He's got no beginning, he's no end. He's infinite. And he's infinite. It's a world of limitations, but that's not him. So he has no limitations. And somebody who's created in a world which has God, finite being, in a finite universe, which is limited, can understand something that's unlimited, which is God. Can understand God. And that, of course, is God. And he sees that the universe works, the clockwork, the planets and the stars going round, and etc. All of that working. There's a prime cause, creator, and motivator of all of that, and that is Hashem. But you've got to say, therefore, that by definition, the next thing is that if God made all of that, and that God is therefore perfect, that God didn't need to do it. And if he did it, it was an act of kindness. So we're starting to get an idea of what God's like just from a logical series of deductions. He is infinite, omnipotent, and by definition, extraordinarily kind in making it in the first place. Which of course means that he brought you into this world. If you, as it were, follow his plan for you in this world, that seems to be the right thing to do. And so he goes on, says Reb Yerucham, at great length. So if I read to a little bit further here, so he says the following thing. But when God sees that there is somebody trying to achieve through pure seichel, pure logic, pure mind, the truth, who is unremitting in his or her demand to find the truth, that's when he, as it were, lets him into the secret. Yoev chachmosa lechachimim, the pasuk that we mentioned before from Daniel. He gives his wisdom to the wise. In other words, if you've expended, you've struggled and worked hard to reach the truth as much as a human being possibly can, at that point, when you've reached the level you can't go any further, then Hashem will say, right, there is knowledge beyond the human seichel, the human intellect. You've gone as far as you can go. You need super seichel. You need something that goes beyond that, and that's Torah. And therefore, that's the answer, says Rabbi Yerucham, Reb Simcha Zissel, why the Rambam doesn't count this. He doesn't count the Ur-Kasdim thing because Avram had worked out logically, it's worth me giving up my life for the sake of God who made the whole thing. That's the logical thing. He expected to die. It's worth dying for that truth. It's just that there's something above that, which he couldn't perceive, that God would not expect him to die for that truth, did not expect him to kill his son ultimately for that truth, and would save him and show him something that exists above that truth. But that stage above that truth is what we call Torah. But Torah is only presented to someone who has exerted themselves to the absolute maximum to find that truth. The reward, and it makes sense, mida keneged mida, measure for measure. You've done your maximum? Okay, sit back and have a rest, and I'll help you out here and make it easier for you and give you new knowledge which you would never have been able to conceive of or perceive of before. That's what he says. So from this says Reb Simcha Zissel, an incredible thing. No human being could really ultimately be worthy of being able to come to Makabel the Torah. Ad b'shil avodas haseichel. Only if he or she has stretched themselves intellectually, logically, honestly, ethically, and morally, factoring themselves out to reach the truth, fact themselves out so much that even they're willing to give up their lives for the truth, then, if you work very hard in Torah, that means that you'll struggle and bear a lot of hardship because of your determination to find the truth. Then perish that you'll listen and you will teach yourself, train yourself to listen to your brain, not to the passions of your heart. Then the Torah will speak to you. Then the Torah will speak to you. Very, very interesting. So says Reb Simcha Zissel. I put that there, and hopefully it doesn't fall down. Rabbi Dessler Mitzvah, and again, we're still in the Yeshivas Kelm, or in the tradition of Kelm. In Chelik Gimel of Mitzvah, in page 51, there's an essay here called Limud Torah. And I'm going to read you a little bit of that, and then we can tie all our strands together. Listen to this. Kod Matan Torah, Hoysa HaTorah L'mayla B'Shamayim. Before the Torah was given on Mount Sinai, then obviously it was in heaven. And that's, I think I told you recently, I've had this beautiful thing from Gedalia Shor in the Sefer Or Gedaliyahu, when he says, the Pasuk says, you remember, back at the end of Devarim, when it says, Lo b'shamayim hi, the Torah is not in heaven, that you would have to say, who's going to go up there and get it for us? And he said, and I thought it was so brilliant, it means literally, the Torah is no longer in heaven. The Torah was in heaven, but when it was given in Mount Sinai, Lo b'shamayim hi, it no longer exists there. It's now down here. Okay, but he says when it was, Kodem Matan Torah, before it was given here, then it was obviously in Shemayim. And to attain the Torah which is up there, literally you will have to go stage by stage, slowly by slowly, up the rungs of the ladder till eventually you would come to that Torah. Because it's not here yet. Omisha Gilasham, Gilo Esatara Besaich Nishmasa Amazucheches. Now, this, I don't know why I've not got this underlined. I will underline this after the share. This is enormous. This is earth-shattering few words. Misha Gil Hashem, anybody who has struggled to reach the truth, as we just saw Reb Simcha Zissel describing, perfected him and herself there through pure intellect to come to the truth. Misha Gil Hashem, and got to that level, Gilo Esatara Besaich Nishmasa Hamazacheches. He will be, now this is very interesting, different to what Reb Simcha Zissel said. He will discover the Torah, which is in heaven, within his own soul. After all, an neshama is a chelik Elokai mimal. The Torah is an expression of Hashem, so too is a human soul. You will discover it within yourself. Very exciting. Lefi darga atzmai, she'agia oleha, relative to how much you've worked to it. You will be revealing it from within your own soul. Ka'omram razalos, Chazal say, Avrohom Avinu, so the Chazal say, he learned it mi'atzma, from within himself. Not he taught himself. Again, you can't teach yourself something you don't know. But he found it within himself. Now, what does that mean? So again, the Medrash says, where did Avram learn Torah? Hashem, this is going to really have you scratching your head. Hashem prepared for him his two kidneys, like two rebbes, like two teachers. He learned the Torah from his kidneys. Amazingly baffling statement. Surely you would agree. The kidney, however, is a euphemism, is a metaphor for the human condition and the human mind, or an aspect of the human mind, or the human personality, perhaps. The thing is, we say this when it comes to, and we just said it not too long ago, as we left Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur behind just a few weeks ago, really. Then we say that Hashem is bochen kloyos. Hashem examines the kidneys. Examines the kidneys? What's that talking about? Well, in Judaism, we often talk about various organs of the body as being a metaphor for various parts of the psyche, parts of the psychology. When it talks about the heart is passions, humans' passions. What are the kloyos? What are the kidneys? So the Sorim saying, Rabbi Dessler says, a kidney, it's very, very different to a heart. You hear a heart pumping. If you've ever been alone in a forest and got lost or really scared, you can actually hear it thumping in your chest. Lungs, it's hard to hear them, but they still make a noise. Lungs come from the old German word lunga, which means actually air. They're very, very thin. The tissue of lungs is extremely thin. And it comes from a word which is air. You can hear wind, a little wind blowing in and out as somebody breathes, but it makes a sound. The kidneys don't make any noise at all. The kidneys don't make any noise at all. So what does it mean, bochen kloyos? And the answer is, what are kloyos? It's a metaphor for when we kid ourselves on. Nobody hears us doing it. If you're lying to somebody else, you have to express it either in writing or in broadcasts or in speech of some sort. But if you're lying to yourself, it's something inside you. No, that'll be okay if I do that, and Hashem won't mind if I do this. What you mean is really want to do it, and you don't care very much what Hashem thinks. So the metaphor is the kidney. Avrohom Avinu discovered the Torah, says the strange measures from his Hashem appointed for him 2 kidneys, 2 aspects of his personality, which he could kid himself on and lie to himself. Hashem says, no. You are going to be the sort of person who will not kid yourself on, fool yourself, know that you're lied, and then go on to believe your lies as the truth. That facility to face up to the truth within yourself was the device that was going to bring Avrohom Avinu to greatness. Behechan Lomad, where did he learn Torah? Zeman Loikadosh Baruch Sheklois Kishnei Rabbonim. He appointed his 2 kidneys to be like 2 teachers. And they drew for him, or drew him to Torah. And the same pursuing the same theme. But somebody who works very hard and perfects his soul, you'll find the Torah from within yourself. So how did Avrohom Avinu learn Torah before the Torah was given? According to Reb Simcha Zissel, who would be the teacher of Rabbi Dessler, his father, that he found it through a gift that came at the end of the rainbow. The rainbow was his strict and uncompromising intellectual search for the truth. The reward, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, that was the Torah. Rabbi Dessler says it slightly differently. He finds it from within himself, and then that's going to come to Torah. He finds it in his soul. He motza es Torah b'nishmasai, v'sagosa hoyisa al pi midragosa shekona, and his understanding was relative to the level which he had achieved. So depending on the spiritual level he would be able to get to, that would give him an insight into the Torah. Olam lo hoyisa hasharas hafucha. Doesn't know what the other way about. Sha'yidei haTorah yizachach es nashay. Not that the Torah is going to purify your soul. Astonishing. It's not the Torah is going to give that gift to you. You've got to give that gift to yourself, and then you'll get Torah. Not the other way about. What does that mean? Well, you're probably familiar with the Talmudic saying, Derech Eretz Kadma Torah. Derech Eretz, I usually translated in Yiddish as Menschlichkeit. Refinement is the word we're struggling for here. If a person refines themselves, but refinement isn't just, an airy-fairy sort of like Emily Bronte, Wuthering Heights type of idea. He's very refined, very English. No, it's talking about refinement of intellect, refinement of determination to come to the truth. Once you reach that, then the Torah can come next. Essentially, Reb Simcha Zissel and Rabbi Dessler here converge on the same idea. Work on yourself. You'll find the answers that will come to you. The Torah, a level above human intellect, comes as a consequence of reaching the zenith of human intellect. Interesting idea. And to reach an intellectual zenith, to reach any height in intellect, is to ask the question, why? I say to my Talmidim, in particular my Talmidas, all the time, there is no such thing in Judaism, in Torah, as a question you cannot ask. It may well be it's a question you can't get the answer to, simply because you are a finite human being, or we are finite human beings, I should say, and the Torah is infinite. So questions like, who made God? Which, of course, you will know is a non-question, because to say who made God is to assume a cause and effect universe. A time when he wasn't there, a time when he is there, a time when he won't be there. That's cause and effect. That's past, present, and future. But as we said before, looking at Simcha Zissel, that if he's above time, and you can work that out logically, as we just did, then by definition, it's a non-question. You can say, who made this watch? There was a time when it wasn't there, a time when it is there. I'm sure it will break at some time, and it will no longer be in existence, because we live in the past, present, and future. But if God's above that, it doesn't apply at all. So the Torah is going to give you something which is beyond the ability and the capability of a human being to reach on their own right. But you've got to ask the question, why? Every question is legitimate in Judaism. It might be that you'll not get the answer at all. Whenever, for example, what's God like? Well, that's a non-question. As the Ramchal says in his Derech Hashem, as soon as you try to describe God, by definition, you've not described him. Because we always define something, describe something by its like. It's a little bit like this, a little bit like that, a little bit like that. No, until you say like with regards to God, it's not like it by definition. Using something that he created to define something who is the creator of that something doesn't work in the slightest. Therefore, we wouldn't know what God was like. We wouldn't be able to understand what God was like, except he did give us some insights. That's the classic 13 midas of Hashem. It was the question Moshe Rabbeinu asked. Let me see you. Let me know what you're like. You can't see it, but I'll give you an insight into it. The 13 aspects of God. So the more that a person strives to reach the highest heights, then the more God, as it were, lets you see how you could get above the limitations of the human psyche and come to something called Torah. And with that, it all fits really quite nicely together. You see, what was Avrohom Avinu's nature? He asked why. And I told you, go back to the Alshich, it's something the Alshich says all the way in his commentary through the Torah. With regards to Yisro and Moshe and all the greats, they asked the question, why this, why that, why not, why, what's all that? You got to ask questions. That's how you learn. That's the basis of why. You're interested. He is a guy who asks why, what, how, where, in a world that's got one language and one way of thinking. And if you're not a sheep, you could be killed for that. Avrohom Avinu is an iconoclast. Avrohom Avinu is an idol smasher. He's also a lie smasher, a falsehood smasher. And that DNA that he created within himself through passing those 10 tests becomes the pattern, becomes the template, and becomes the heritage of all those who can proudly call themselves a Ben or Bas, Avram or Sora. If you want to see what a Jew is like, it's somebody who's not a sheep. It's somebody who's a questioner. And you want to see what a real Jew is like, they'll never lie to themselves and kid themselves on. It's rigorous truth. Even if where the truth takes me is going to be challenging, difficult, something that I might have to struggle with. But the truth, Asher Noselona Taras Emes, comes to those who seek the truth. That was Avrohom Avinu. A lone voice in a world where people don't look and people don't think. I will look forward to seeing you next week. And again, sorry for the delay on the share. Have a wonderful, fabulous week.